All right. Tell me, guys, what is slope-intercept form? Just say it. You can say it. We're good. Y equals mx plus b. Write that down. So for those of you that don't have it, just write y equals mx plus b. What does m stand for? Slope. The slope. What does b stand for? The y-intercept. Can you switch? Do you mind? I appreciate it. Give him a minute. All right. Then it says circle the equations. If you don't have it, you don't have to write this part down. Just pay attention. Circle the equations that are in slope-intercept form. Mark out the ones that are not. So the first one, y equals 2x plus 1. Is that written in slope-intercept form? Absolutely. So we're going to circle it. What's the slope of that guy? 2. What's the y-intercept? 1. The next one, 7y equals 14x minus 7. Is that written in slope-intercept form? No. So we're going to cross it out. How about y equals 2x? Is that written in slope-intercept form? Yes. Absolutely. What is the slope of that one? 2. What's the y-intercept? 0. Has an invisible plus 0, if you remember. How about the next one? Is that slope-intercept form? No. How about the next one? No. All right. Sometimes we need to move our equations around to put them in slope-intercept form. So that's what we're learning today. We do this so that we can find the blank of the line. What is it? Slope. Find the blank of the line. Jahan? Tell me. Y-intercept. That's right. The y-intercept. The y-intercept. Very good. Or to be able to blank the line. Graph. Graph. You guys agree? All right. Moving on. So for this next part, I'm just going to go to here. We're going to talk about this guy. All right. So first of all, is this written in slope-intercept form? Yes. What is the slope? What is the y-intercept? -4. If you were to graph this, how would you know where to start? On the y. Don't say on the y. On the y-axis. Got that? All right. We haven't talked about this yet. How many terms are there? Nope. Just listen. How many terms are there on the board? 4's a guess. 1's a guess. What else? 2's a guess. 3's a guess. Okay. There are 3 terms on the board. Here are the terms. Ready? First term is y. The second term is 3x. And the third term is -4. So there's 3 terms. Have you guys ever heard the word coefficient? I believe you guys are talking about that in science, right? What's a coefficient? Here. Coefficient in this problem would be the 3, because 3 is in front of the x. So 3 would be considered a coefficient. 3 is what you would say is 3 is the coefficient of x. There's another coefficient. What is it? It's 1. That's right. There is an invisible 1 in front of this y. So 1 would be considered the coefficient of y. Understand? All right. And what about the -4 that we haven't really mentioned? That is a term, but there's another word for it if it's just by itself and not connected to a variable. Does anybody know? It's called a constant. A constant, all right? So don't worry about filling in all that stuff on the paper. I just wanted to go over those terms with you quickly. Here we go. So we have this equation right here. 6x plus 2y equals 24. So now we're getting to sort of the meat of what we're talking about today. 6x plus 2y equals 24. Here we go. Is this equation written in slope-intercept form? Is it? Yes or no? Everybody needs to be following along, participating. It is not written in slope-intercept form, okay? When I write something in slope-intercept form, as you know, it's y equals mx plus b. So what variable is by itself? Which of these variables is by itself? The y. The y is the only thing on that side of the equation. So when we put things in slope-intercept form, we want to isolate the y. We want to get the y by itself. And right now, is the y by itself? It is not. So I got to get it by itself. So what are the two things that are keeping y from being by itself? Two things. This 2 is, yes? And what's the other thing keeping y from being by itself? The 6x. So there's two things. Remember way back when we were talking about solving equations, we said we always go after the number that is not attached. Well, which term is not attached? The 2 or the 6x from the y? So I want to move 6x from this side of the equation to the other. Well, to do that, I can't just magically move it. I have to do something. I need to cancel it here so that it will appear over here. Well, how do I go from 6x to 0? What do I do? So do this on your paper. Subtract 6x. So everybody, write down the original. Subtract 6x. Subtract 6x from the other side as well. Don't move ahead of me. The first thing that I'm going to bring down is the equal sign. The equal sign. So, when I write things in slope-intercept form, I always have what come right after the equal sign? My slope and then the x attached to it, right? In this problem, what's going to be my slope with the x attached to it? No. This right here. That's a good question. Can you do 24 minus 6x? No. Why not? They're not like terms. So this is going to come first. Negative 6x goes right here. And then is that a positive 24 or a negative 24? So I write plus 24. The concept here, guys, is this. I always am going to write my mx term immediately following the equal sign. It just makes life easier on us. And then what am I left with on the left-hand side? 2y. So 2y then equals that. Now, am I in slope-intercept form? I am not, but I'm a lot closer, aren't I? So what number do I need to get rid of now? The 2. What number do I want to be where 2 is? 1. How do I go from 2 to 1? Divide. So I'm going to divide every single term, all 3 terms, by 2. When I do that, bring down the equal sign. What am I left with on the left-hand side? 1y, which is the same thing as what? Y. So I get y equals, then on the right-hand side, negative 6x divided by 2 is negative 3x. And then next to that, I have 24 divided by 2, which is positive 12. So I write plus 12. Absolutely. Absolutely. Am I in slope-intercept form? Yes. Very good. That's it. So the quiz that you guys are taking next class will give you an equation that looks something like this, something that is not in slope-intercept form, and it'll say, what? Find the what? Find the, no, it's not going to say put it in slope-intercept form. What does slope-intercept form help us to be able to do? It helps us graph, it helps us identify what the slope is, it helps us identify what the y-intercept is. So the quiz is going to say this. It's going to give you an equation that looks like this, and it's going to say graph that. Well, in order to graph that, thank you, you have to put it in what form? Slope-intercept form. Another thing that the quiz could say is, it could say, what is the slope of the line? Well, in order to determine what the slope of this line is, what form must it be in? Slope-intercept form. It could say, what is the y-intercept of this line? Well, in order to determine what the y-intercept is of this, what form must it be in? Slope-intercept. So that's the idea. So it'll give you something that's not in slope-intercept form. You manipulate it so that it is in slope-intercept form, and then you do whatever it is that it asks you to do. Got it? Let's move to the next one on your paper. It says, talk to me. 4x minus 3y minus 2y equals 10. All right, am I in slope-intercept form, guys? I'm not. I want to go after the thing that's not attached. What do I move first? 4x. How do I move 4x from one side to the other? Subtract 4x. Subtract 4x. Watch this. Bring down the equal sign. How do I write this on the right-hand side? Can I do 6x? Is 10 minus 4x 6x? It's not, because they're not like terms. So what do I write? Negative 4x plus 10. And then what about the left-hand side? Good. There's a very common mistake that kids make here. What do you think it is? They only write 2y and they forget to bring the negative with it. But we would never do that, right? So negative 2y. Now I'm trying to get y by itself. Yeah? So I'm going to divide everything. I'm going to divide everything by negative 2. Divide by negative 2. Divide by negative 2. Bring down the equal sign. I get y equals, what's negative 4x divided by negative 2? It's positive because it's a negative and a negative. So it's 2x. And then 10 divided by negative 2 is negative 5, since it's a positive and a negative. So y equals 2. So guys, what's the slope of this line? 2x. No, x is never part of the slope, just that's the coefficient in front. So it's 2. What's the y-intercept? Negative 5. Does this make sense, guys?
Wait, wouldn't it be a negative 1y?
Nope. What's anything divided by itself? 1. Anything divided by itself is 1. Good question, though. All right, what does the next one say? Y minus 2x equals 9. Is that right? If it's positive, then 1y is the same thing as y. So I don't need to. If there's a negative sign, then I would. All right, so somebody help me out. What do? I add 2x in this instance, right? Because again, I'm trying to get y by itself, and since this is negative, I know that the way to get it up to 0 would be to add 2x. So I do add 2x, add 2x, bring down the equal sign. I'm left with y equals, what about the right-hand side here? Do I write, I always write that term first, so it's positive 2x this time, so 2x, and then what?
Plus 9.
Absolutely. Any questions, guys? What's the next one say? 3x plus 4y equals 5. This one has some subtleties to it. 3x plus 4y equals 5. What do I do first, guys? Good. From both sides. Boom. Now what? What do I have on the right-hand side?
Negative 3x plus 5.
Good. What about the left-hand side? 4y. I'm not in slope-intercept form because I got to get rid of that 4. What are you thinking? Divide everything by 4. Divide by 4. Divide by 4. Divide by 4. Now watch this. Super important. Bring down the equal sign. Obviously, you're left with y on the left-hand side. But everybody grab a calculator and do negative 3 divided by 4. Hit math, frac, and see if you can simplify it. Can you? So here's rule number 1. You never, ever, 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 ever write your slope as a decimal. You always write it as a what or a what? A fraction or a whole number if it is one. So here's how I want you to write negative 3x over 4. Watch, guys. This is important. Don't write negative 3x divided by 4. Write negative 3/4 times x. They mean the same thing, but it just is a little bit more clear what your slope is when you write it like that. With me? Now, you are allowed to represent a y-intercept as a decimal. What is 5 divided by 4? It's 1.25. So I do what plus 1.25. So those are my two things there.
Aren't we not allowed to get decimals in the test books? Like, aren't we not supposed to?
No, sometimes you can. Maybe on it might have been on a previous test. I maybe said there's no decimals on this page, but that's not a general rule though. Again, let me read it. You're not allowed to have a decimal for the slope, but you are allowed to have a decimal for the y-intercept. And the reason for that is because, think about it. What do you have a better understanding of the value of a number, whether it's a... Do you understand what 5/4 is? Maybe a little bit, but do you understand what 1.25 is? You probably really understand that number, right? It's a little bit harder to understand what the actual value of a fraction. That's why it's okay to use. But for why do we always want to represent this as a slope if we can? For what purpose? So we can graph it easier. Yeah? Moving on. The next one says 8y equals x. Is this written in slope-intercept form, guys? No. What number do I need to get rid of? The 8. How do I get rid of the 8? I divide. Anything divided by itself is 1, so then I'm left with 1y, which is just, watch this, guys. This is important. What's the invisible number in front of the x? 1. So here's how I want you to write that. I don't want you to write 1x over 8. I want you to write 1/8 times x. It's much clearer as to what the slope is when you write it like that. You agree? What's the y-intercept of this problem? 0. What's the slope? 1 over 8. Moving on. Yes, sir. Moving on. The next one says 5y equals 4x plus 15. 5y equals 4x plus 15. Now, what are you guys thinking? No, I want to get y by itself. Y is almost by itself. I'm just going to divide by 5. Yes? I want to get y by itself. What is the only thing that's keeping y from being by itself? Only the 5. Right? You got to keep in mind the overall concept, as opposed, don't just get stuck in the routine of doing the same thing every time. Think about what you're trying to accomplish. So divide by 5, divide by 5, divide by 5. You get y equals, what over here? Yep. 4 over 5x plus 3. Absolutely. How would you graph that? What would you do? No. When you graph something, you always start at the y-intercept. That's always going to be your first point. And then to find all of your other points, what do? You go up 4 to the right 5, or down 4 to the left 5. You always start, Brian, always start right there. Good job. I believe this is the last one. It says 7x minus y equals 6. What do you guys think? If I added 7x, I get 14x. I don't want 4. I subtract 7x. Subtract 7x. Put it on the other side. Do the same thing to the other side. Ari, what do I have over here? Perfect. Negative 7x plus 6. And what about on the left-hand side, guys? What am I left with? Don't forget about that. Good job. Don't forget about that negative 1 in front of the y. Now, how do I get rid of that negative 1? I divide by that same. Anytime you divide a number by itself, what do you get? No. 1. And that's what I want. I want this to say 1y. So divide by negative 1, divide by negative 1, divide by negative 1. So I get y equals, what's that give me? Nope, I don't have the over 1. 7x. 7x is what it gives me. I don't have to write the over 1. So 7x, and then what's 6 divided by negative 1? So it's minus 6. So again, on your quiz that you're taking next class, it's going to give you something that looks like this, and it's going to say, graph it. And how do you graph something? You got to put it in what form? Got to put it in slope-intercept form. Or it could say, what is the slope and y-intercept? And how do you do that? What form must it be in? Slope-intercept form. It's not a long quiz. I think there's maybe like 8 questions, but it's worth just as much as the other quizzes that we've taken. Any questions, guys? On the first one on the back of that paper is already written in what form? Already written in slope-intercept form. Get started on the back.